All right, let's talk about equity. So pay policies, I said this in the very first video, they're the most important HR tool we have for encouraging desired behaviors and discouraging undesired behaviors. Pay is very powerful in the way that we can motivate people to do things. And at the heart of it all, we want our little scale that we use to balance how we're being paid versus what we are putting in, we want it to seem equal. And when it seems like I am not getting as much out as I'm putting in, that it seems unfair. So this is equity theory. And according to equity theory, employees are always comparing their inputs and their outputs. Their inputs are things like their time. That's the big one. How much time and effort am I putting into this job? But also, we look at our education, our experience, our qualifications, all the things that we bring, that we're doing that maybe other people aren't doing. So how are we contributing? It doesn't seem fair when one employee's inputs exceeds another, but they're paid differently. So if we both show up at the same time, we both do the same amount of work, and you make $5 an hour more than I do, it doesn't seem fair. However, as I said before, when I used my Joe and Mary bicycle company example in the very first video, and I said, Joe has 20 years of experience and Mary has never built a bicycle before, that does seem somehow fair. That you say, well, the reason we pay Joe more is because he brought these things to the table. So there are two concepts of equity, and it's important that you know what they are and know the difference between the two. So external equity is that example I gave in another video. When I'm in my job, I'm perfectly happy. I work at Cane's and I make $15 an hour and it seems great until I find out that my friend at Chick-fil-A makes $18 an hour. And those are made up numbers, so I don't know what people at Chick-fil-A make an hour, but just for the sake of this argument, it feels like the same job, and someone in another company is doing the similar job and making a lot more money. That's how I evaluate external equity. Internal equity is in the same organization. It's when Joe and Mary work for my bicycle company and one makes more than the other. That is relative to someone else in my company, internal equity, relative to someone else in another company, external equity. So here's the thing to know about people and pay. Here's my psychologist analysis of what I know about people and pay. If people feel that they are being paid fairly, their behavior typically doesn't change one way or another. If they aren't unhappy, it doesn't make them more happy. They consider fairness a baseline thing. However, if someone has an advantage, if they know I am being paid way more than anyone else, when you find that out for a hot minute, you will think, wow, that's awesome. And then the way the human brain will quickly work is to say, actually, it is fair that I'm paid more. I deserve more. I do more than everyone else. I'm smarter than everyone else. I'm better than everyone else. That's just what we normally do. So our brains typically don't think that we are ever at an advantage. That's just not what our brains do. Our brains will quickly rationalize and come up with reasons why it's okay for you to have more. If you feel like you have less, you are underpaid, you're disadvantaged in some way, then you will try, according to equity theory, you try to adjust that input to output ratio. So if I feel like my outputs are not as up to my level of inputs, maybe I'm just going to give a little bit less. My effort's going to go down. I'm going to show up a little later. And I can rationalize it every time and say, well, they aren't paying me enough anyway. And so I don't care if I'm a little late. Or I don't care if I, just kind of slack off and take a longer lunch. Or You may even go so far as stealing from the company, and that could be, legitimate big pictures, taking money out of the cash register. And it can be small things that people, again, rationalize. They don't pay me enough, so I'm just going to take this toilet paper home with me. They don't pay me enough, I'm just going to take this box of pencils. I need some paper at home. I'm going to take some computer paper from work, which is technically still stealing, just for the record. So if you're wondering if that's okay, it's not. It's stealing. And that is often why people think it's okay to steal, is because they aren't paying me what they should. And then that concept that we talked about in the last module, when we talked about withdrawal, job withdrawal, and we want to avoid job withdrawal. You will see job withdrawal if people feel that they aren't being paid fairly. They will either physically not show up or psychologically kind of zone out, cyber slack, do some online shopping instead of their work, whatever. And also important to note, as an HR person or a person who might own a business or determine how to pay people in a business, that if you ever ask someone to do something that requires more work or more hardship, I'm going to ask you to work the night shift, or I'm going to ask you to do this in worse conditions. You used to work inside, now you're going to do the same job, but you're going to be outside in the heat. Those sorts of hardships require you to pay more. People definitely expect, when you ask something that is unpleasant or not as good, that they will be paid to compensate them for that hardship. All right, in the next video, we're going to talk about job evaluations and some alternative pay structures to consider when you are creating pay structures. Stay tuned for that video.